Okay. There we go. Okay, cool. All right. I think people should now be able to hear me. I'm hoping so anyway. I'm having a little issue with OBS where if I like go to a different scene, it's just like deciding, oh, you don't need audio, and it's just like taking away all of my audio controls, and then apparently making all of this just muted. So I'm not exactly sure why. It does mean we'll probably just wind up staying here on the main screen, but that's beside the point. Let's get rolling here. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison. I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft inside of Cloud and AI. And these days I focus in on students. But in a prior life, I spent a fair bit of time over in another organization called Customer Software Engineering, or CSE, where I worked a fair bit on bots. I actually spent about 2.5 years doing a lot of bot work over there, doing a lot of work with Lewis, and really just having a great time. And so today, I'm absolutely thrilled and honored, and I mean that sincerely, to be joined by Ben Brown. Ben Brown, by way of a little bit of background here, and I'll let him introduce himself in a couple of minutes. Actually, spearheaded this fantastic OSS bot SDK called Botkit, which is now actually part of Microsoft Bot Framework. And as he likes to put it, you could actually write code for a bot. Obviously, it wouldn't be doing a whole lot, but you could actually write code for a bot that would be the size of a tweet, and that's pretty neat. So these days, Ben helps manage Bot Framework as it currently sits, and today he's going to answer my questions and answer your questions about Bot Framework and all of that. So Ben, thank you so much for joining today.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my first question then, before we get started, is like, what's your background? How did you find your way here?
It's a long story, but I grew up as a kid in the '90s with rudimentary internet back then, text messaging and chat rooms. And so I started building bots when I was a kid. And about 5, 6 years ago, people started getting serious about chat in the workplace all of a sudden. And I found that opportunity to sort of go back to my passion for building this kind of software, and have been doing so full time ever since.
That's cool. So what were the bots that you were originally building for like chat rooms doing? How did you build that?
So back in the olden times, when you would dial up to the internet and possibly connect to some sort of university system, there were different kinds of chat rooms. Some of them were role playing games. Some of them were more utilitarian, and but all of them could be basically programmed in. So you could have, an application, a little script sitting alongside the normal users, and performing whatever sort of function you want. So sometimes we would use that to reboot the mail server, but also we would have the dungeon master bot that would perform role playing game tasks, or things like that. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I dig that. Okay. Well, then let me ask you kind of the fantastic starter question, and I want to mention real quick to everybody that's viewing the fact that we are live here. So please feel free to ask all of the questions that you want. That's what we're here for. But let me start with this question, which is what is a bot? Because a lot of times, like when I'm talking to a customer, they hear the word bot and they just immediately assume that it's this amazing thing that just because it's a bot, it can solve world hunger and do all of these just crazy things. So what is a bot?
I mean, I think you could think about it two ways. One would be that it's a piece of software that lives alongside users in like a communication system, right? So that would be the traditional chatbot type of thing. So you're in an IRC channel, and like I said, you can message to the bot just like you could message to the user. A more contemporary definition would be brought into like what we call conversational software interfaces. So things that are powered by language, that might be typed language, like in a traditional chatbot scenario, but it might also be spoken or some other modality. And on the back end, software that processes that naturally and then responds using that same modality. So if I speak to it, it speaks back. If I type to it, it types back, et cetera. But what's inside that bot, what the actual functionality is basically software development. It could be anything.
Okay. All right. Well, then why would I want to build a chatbot?
Good question. I mean, okay. For me, my favorite reason is that chatbots allow you. My sort of passion for bots is primarily in the like multi-user workspace, right? So we are all working together as an engineering team, and we have a chatbot in our engineering chat that allows us to do common tasks that our team requires, right? So let's just say we need to close pull requests. The traditional way of doing that would be that I would go to the website alone on my screen and close the pull request, and then maybe I might tell my team, hey, I closed that pull request, and they might see it in some other way. But if I do that via a chatbot, I can do that where and with my team so that they all see it happening interactively and see that action in the context of the conversation where we might have just been talking about closing the pull request, right? Hey, Ben, can you close that pull request? Sure. Hey, bot, close a pull request. Pull request closed. So the whole loop is there in the conversation context, which I find extremely valuable.
Okay.
Especially when you think about sort of modern team chat interfaces where we can have cards, and cards can be updated asynchronously. So what you really get is little pieces of software delivered to you like intelligently in the context of your day-to-day business conversation. In no law application, it can be something that is just a little card. So I find that also very exciting as a somebody who likes to build software that solves problems.
Okay. Okay, that's cool. So you mentioned just kind of real quickly there, card. What is what's a card?
So bots built with Bot Framework have support for this standard called adaptive cards, and it's basically a format for presenting complex data, sort of tabular data, inside a chat interface. So you can imagine things like small forms, but also carousels and results lists and things like that, where I would have a thumbnail, title, so that kind of formulaic UI elements. And these are driven by JSON structures, so easy for developers to build, and then they can be rendered on whatever device as a native UI.
Okay, so I can go beyond text, because a lot of times when you think of like a chatbot, you're thinking about, well, I'm typing out messages, but I can have the bot send something that's not just simply text then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the platform, the sort of end where the end user is, right? They have different platform capabilities. And this is actually one of the more interesting things about building these conversational user interfaces these days, because many times you might want your same bot to live in, let's say, Teams, and also on a voice assistant device. And so, or use voice as a secondary or even the primary interface, but also have text. So how do you design an interface that, like, on one device might use a card with buttons, but also allow the user to naturally say, say some command or follow up, and they might say it in a more informal way. They might say it using terminology that you don't expect. So all sorts of really interesting design challenges, because in the end you're building an app, right? It's you're still building software. Like you said, it's not magic, and so you have to sort of design solutions for these things.
That's something that I always like to say whenever I'm teaching anything, is that, whatever it is, it's not magic. Like, whatever you're building, you've got these core skills. You've done a lot of this already. Obviously, there's new things that you have to learn. Which actually kind of leads perfectly. So, Emmy Keith asks, I'm a total newbie when it comes to chatbots. Do you build chatbots in programs or tools API, or do you use a third-party application? So, like, how do you? Let's start with, how do you build a chatbot, and then I think we can talk a little bit about where you might be targeting that chatbot, which I know you had like hinted at a little bit there. So let's start with, how do I build a chatbot? Where do I go to build one?
Sure. So for somebody who's knows how the internet works at the very least, chatbots are basically just APIs that receive messages from users and then send responses back. Like, that is the mechanism by which chatbots exist in the universe. So a very simple chatbot could receive the message, parse it, and send the response back, and do nothing else, right? And you can build that with basically any programming language that does HTTP transactions, right? You need a web server and a little piece of code. Um, However, most bots are more sophisticated, and the way we build them now is a mixture of natural language processing technology and sort of the computational aspects of things, like the program that you write. And that is we have a tool called Bot Framework, which is an SDK that gives you tools for lots of these things. But we also have an application called Bot Framework Composer, which is a GUI front end for building chatbots and piecing together all of these pieces. So in this one app, you have the capability of sort of designing the functionality and creating the natural language models to make it respond in all those flexible ways.
Okay, cool. Your video resized on me. Let me fix that. There we go. Stay. All right. Yeah.
Gonna bust out of this little box. I'm gonna get out.
Ben is just taking over my screen. So let me. So you mentioned that there's the composer, and then there's the SDK. So I have a GUI that I can use to create a bot, and then I also have code or an SDK that I can use. Let me ask you about the GUI first. Let me start here. Question one, could a business user, so a non-programmer, maybe somebody that's like, a little bit of a hobbyist, maybe they've got like strong tech skills, but they're really more of a business user than a developer, could they develop something using Composer similar to how somebody might be able to develop something using Power Apps who's not a developer?
So I think that's our goal, but a longer term goal. Right now we're trying to give these tools to developers who don't need, or who need these sort of power tools to accelerate their ability to build these bots and build more complex bots and manage sort of production bots and things like that. But but certainly we're trying to broaden the audience for building bots to those people. And we hear all the time the interest in building bots does include those people, and so you can see the beginnings of that, I think, in Composer. Normal people can piece together these functionalities, which otherwise would be. Now, I come from a world of building these like programming tools, right? The best case scenario is that you're handling your raw, HTTP incoming request, handing that off to like a SDK and like building to the SDK. With Composer, all of those details go away and you focus on, what do you want my bot to say? When the person connects, what should it say back? And you can piece things together. Is it Excel? No. Is it accessible to somebody who is very good at Excel? Yes.
Okay. Okay. So would a fair analogy here maybe be like logic apps?
I mean, we're on the spectrum, right? I think
Okay.
they are still closer to the where the business user is, than Composer, because we're Composer is also fairly early on. We just had our 1.0 release, so we're building abstractions now that are going to make the more complex behaviors, easier to access and things like that. Right now, it's pretty bare to, close to the metal, even as a GUI.
Okay, okay, that's fair. And so then the SDK, obviously that's geared for developers. That's somebody who's going to get in and write code.
If you want to start and learn how all these things work and have the full spectrum of, those developer tools, absolutely, the SDK is a way to go. I think another way to think about it, though, is like the SDK is still there with Composer, and it's now the mechanism. We give you all the stuff you need out of the box, but if you want to go in and customize and extend that, you have the full capabilities of that SDK. So it's really like an extensibility thing on top of what we give you up front, which is like much closer to a working bot than you would get from like line one of SDK code.
Okay. Okay. All right. But you did highlight there. So it sounds like if I start with Composer, that I could still go ahead and access the code. So if I like reach the limits of where Composer sits right now, or if Composer just doesn't do something that I need to do, then I can still go in and access the code and write the code.
That's right. Yeah, it's one of the cool things about Composer is, amongst the many things, I'll list a couple. Composer is an open source product, so all the full source is available there. You can build it yourself, etc. MIT license, great thing. When you're using Composer, it's actually writing files just into a bot project on your hard drive. So it's got the code there, it's got the JSON files there, it's got all the source stuff there. So you basically can look at that in Visual Studio, and it looks like a normal C# or JavaScript project. And you can then extend your bot project by coding, but you can also code to our SDK standard, and the things that you add to your bot project will like magically appear in Composer as well.
Oh,
So like you
interesting.
can create custom little actions and things like that. Very, very extensible. So it's a very powerful system, but we've provided a lot of all, the stuff that you need to get going, but you can always plug in and tweak all the little details, which is, really cool as, for somebody who's building a chatbot, who's
Yeah.
probably into tweaking the details.
Absolutely. So then it sounds like if somebody is new to chatbots, then it would be play around with Composer first, start building your bot there, and then start to take a look at the SDK.
Yeah, that's what I would say. If you're starting today, compose are where you want to go. Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So there was something else that you called out in the middle. There was a couple of big items that you called out in the middle, but the first one I want to ask the question on is NLP, which of course is natural language processing, and that's where a computer can understand the intent of the user, that they can try and figure out what it is the user's saying. Do I need NLP when I'm building a bot?
So I don't think there's like a hard answer on that. Yeah, the way I approach it is, you use it when you need to and when it's going to be the most impactful. But you can certainly start without it. A lot of bots, in the long tradition of chatbots, which goes way back further than you would imagine, we didn't have, NLP APIs that were available. We did not have that. We had regular expressions, we had pattern matches, we had, dumb searches across databases. So you can get a long way with that kind of stuff. And I don't think that people should, turn up their nose at a regular expression when a regular expression will do the job. Um, that said, at some level of complexity and sophistication, the NLP really does pay off, I think, in a big way. We can build patterns where you can do things like, collect a value from the user, present that value back to the user. They can say like, no, not actually that, this other thing. It will like swap that value out, do all sorts of like granular kind of input controls using natural language. And you don't have to worry as a programmer about like you said, what is your name? And the user said, oh, people call me Ben. And I didn't have to parse out with regular expressions, 50,000 variations of that phrase, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Hugely
That.
valuable and something that not easily done in code and not easily done in a database.
Yep.
So very, very valuable for those kind of scenarios. And also intent classification, as you mentioned, is hugely powerful. If you have a large audience where people say diverse things and you have similar things and all sorts of things like that, NLP can be a great tool for making that actually possible.
Okay. You mentioned another service in the middle there, or actually, I think this was a bit earlier, where you talked about speech. That if I had a nickel for every time that I was talking to somebody who was building a chatbot, and they just immediately assumed that it needed speech, I'd be able to take my wife out for kind of a nice dinner. So. Let me ask you this question: let's start with is speech needed, and where does speech really shine when it comes to a bot?
Great question. I mean, it's a really cool, technology, and I mean, I think people are excited about it, and not always necessary. So, look, if you're building a command and control bot for your team, your engineering team, you probably don't need voice. If you're building, customer service Q&A bot on your website, you may not you probably don't need voice, but you might want to offer it. But there, if you're doing automated call center functionality, or doing telephony control, or tying in to live agent handoff and things like that, like you absolutely do need to consider those interfaces. But I would make the case that if possible, it's probably just good for the universe to do it, because if you can voice enable your applications, you can make them more accessible to people, and more available on different modalities than you can if you're purely in a visual mechanism. And it forces you to consider that input in a more diverse way, where people say things in a different way than they would type them. So I think it's a good practice to sort of think for designing for voice, because heck, it's on a screen right now, but it may not be when we all get our VR goggles or whatever finally next year, right? Or our AR glasses. And then all of a sudden they're going to be like, well, hell, how do we design for voice? And these chatbot people are going to be the ones who know how to do it.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So you're saying basically like I should always be considering voice, and I should always make sure that my app has the ability to make that transition.
where necessary, right? Like obviously it's a bigger technology ask to tie in voice, although that stuff is fairly available now, and there's voice functionality inside bot framework, etc. But um, uh, if you like, voice is the ultimate like bad channel, right? In terms of like input output, like you have no visual affordances, so you can't do buttons. You can't, you have to be extremely concise in your language. You have to be all of that. And then on the input, somebody could they say all sorts of weird stuff. They could say repeat that. They could say, can you go back? All of those kind of things that you wouldn't do if you could see a chat history, but would
Right.
now be applicable but so you solve it for voice, but you solve it also for texting. You solve it for some unknown chat client that only shows one message at a time. Who knows, right?
So boy, you touched on something that's huge there, which is the user experience, the UX. I want to go into that in just 1 second. There was a question though that came in. Mindcast Software asks, is voice support built into Composer, or does something else need to convert the speech to the text, and then I guess in turn converting the text back to the speech?
Yeah, so it's not built into Composer, but there we have. I'm not the best person to say exactly how this works, but there's a cloud service that does the text to speech and speech to text, and connects to the bot framework. So you don't really worry about it as a bot developer. What you get is the text,
Okay.
the spoken text. And I believe you can also get access to the audio if you're going to do sophisticated things like that. But by default, you would just get the text. And outside of your bot in the cloud is that translation is happening. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I know that we do have cognitive services that will do speech to text and text to speech and all of that. Is there an option in Composer for me to just say, hey, this is my target for speech to text, or do I have to write a little bit of code for that? If you don't know, that's fine.
That actually happens in the Azure portal, where
Oh,
you sort of
interesting.
connect your bot to different channels. So in the
Oh,
in once your bot is like up and running, you can basically say enable voice, and those options can be configured to just kind of turn on. And then our web chat client supports it and things like that. So it's very good.
oh, that's
It's
fantastic. So I can do that then on the Azure portal. That I don't even need to be thinking about this when I'm writing my code. I can just, when I deploy my bot out to the Azure portal, there's just a checkbox and I can configure whatever it is that I want it to do from there.
that's right. I wouldn't say you don't have to think about, like we said, there's design considerations
Yeah.
and things like that. But from a technology standpoint, you can kind of like add it on later. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a question about if we're going to be showing any actual code examples or not. And really, the goal here is to just sort of chat about Chatbot. So not necessarily show off any demos. But if you've got something that you want to show off, that's great. But otherwise, like the primary goal here is to go ahead and really just chat. Especially because
Uh,
like you
there,
because you highlighted something that I thought was really interesting, which I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, which is the user experience. That one of the things that I always like to highlight when you're creating a bot is that when I'm using like Windows, or I'm using, like, let's say, my mobile phone here, there's certain components of the interface that because of the fact that we've been using this for such a long time, we just sort of become accustomed to, like the hamburger in the upper left hand corner. That obviously doesn't exist inside of a bot. And then on top of that, the user, unlike being used with a mobile phone, also really hasn't been trained yet. Like it's this is almost like trying to do, mobile web development back in, say 1998, that nobody had any experience with that, and now here we are trying to do that with a chatbot. So this is a very long-winded way of me getting to, I guess, kind of question number one here, which is, how do I think about that? How do I think about how I want to best engage with the user in that experience? What are some of the things that I need to think about there?
That's a great question. It's funny that you mentioned web development in 1998. WAP. Remember WAP?
Yes.
Oh boy. It's not chatbots. Not that far off. Surprisingly, or not surprisingly. I think that you want to use the mechanisms that are available to you on the channel, right? So if you have, there's no reason that your web chat client cannot use buttons or things like that. So if you have them, you can use them.
So buttons are okay.
Buttons are great, right? And I think that what you're trying to do as a chatbot developer, as a developer of one of these pieces of software, is to really develop to deliver the fulfillment of the user's request in as few steps as possible. Like, that is why we're using AI to extract entities out of utterances, right? We could show you a form and you could tab your way through the form. But the benefit of a conversational UI is that I can say, like, I want, I want a pizza and make it large or whatever, and I can nail them both items in one string. Forgive me for referencing pizza. It's the worst chatbot example in history. But
You're
I can
just
say
making me
reboot
hungry.
server 5, and it knows that I meant reboot and also server 5. One command, super awesome, right? Now, don't confuse that with the command line, which also sort of has those characteristics, but is much more formulaic than the way you would be able to interact with the chatbot. So use the affordances you can, but build in that sort of language sophistication as is possible, and as you have the resources to do so, because people will say crazy stuff to chatbots, and the better you handle that, the better experience your user is. Particularly if you're able to route them from their nonsense request to an appropriate fulfillment, right? Because again, what we want is not to demonstrate cool technology. We want, the ideal experience would be like, the chatbot came up and it said, here are the top 5 requests. Is one of them, is yours one of these? Click, done, right? The chatbot's intelligence showed you the right option at the right time. And like I was saying about the team chat, that's about being in context and using a lightweight UI interface to bring that functionality right to the user right when they need it, instead of going open a new tab, fill in a form, do all of those sort of computer use tasks that.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Hold 1 second. I need to. There we go. I'm just gonna do this. There's a couple of people that are saying there's an echo. It might be on my end, so I'm just gonna plug in a headset here real quick.
You want me to do the same?
If you've got one, sure. Yeah, just and then just like that, no more echo. Okay, cool. All right, and can you still hear me, Ben?
I can.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. And I can hear you. Excellent. All right, cool. Yeah, sorry about that. All right. So we were talking about buttons. So one of the things that that I would always say when I was doing web development is that a button or drop down list was the perfect bit of UX, because then you could take the text box away and you could restrict what it is that the user is able to say there, and of course it then just made the experience easier. But then at the same time, what's also great then is you can make it very clear what the user's options are. So, like, again, going with the terrible example of the pizza bot, that I might not know what the toppings are, or going with the other sort of like classic terrible example, which is the help desk bot. That, if I'm not sure about what my options are with regards to like categorizing a ticket or something like that, like being able to show a set of buttons is perfect for that. So that way the user knows, oh, okay, this is what's expected of me.
Right. And look, I mean, I think you would find a common pattern in chatbots that would be like, let the user have a free text input, and then if it doesn't match a subset of valid options, show them a list of buttons. But I would ask, like, why not just show them the list of buttons the first time? And that's because people want to show off their like natural language input technology, which is fine, but efficiency and user experience, would dictate like show the most common buttons if you can.
Right.
I think. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, that goes for all sorts of, it's the same philosophy as we had with like web design and app design and things like that, right? Where like your screen gets smaller, you make choices about what you need to put on that screen. And like this is the smallest screen because really you have one, if you're lucky, you can show a small adaptive card and it's on a phone screen, or it's on like it's like blasted out all over the wide screen on somebody's giant laptop. You have no control over what the thing looks like.
Right.
So you have to be very conscious of that and like judicious in your use of every one of those elements. And again, if there's a chance, and I think this is kind of a beautiful thing, right? If there's a chance that your card interface is going to be read aloud, all the better that you can take the time to design what that read aloud version would be, and make it, and because that's going to make it not only just accessible to voice, but accessible to people who use, who are vision impaired and people who are using different devices and all sorts of things. So, it's a very cool design constraint, I think.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So that way you're sort of thinking about where it is that it's going to be consumed and making sure that it could be consumed across the board. There's a lot of great questions that have come in. I'm actually going to kind of start from the bottom here and work my way up. So question one is, taking it further, would the goal for the bot be to understand any input that the user could ask for, though? And that's a question from Meat Cave.
Any input, I would say no. Excuse me, no.
Okay.
I think that people tend to over-index on wanting to have a breadth of responses when it's okay to have a narrow domain, and things that are out of that domain can be rejected politely or routed to a ticket or something like that. But what you want to be effective, I think.
Okay. So my bot doesn't need to be able to handle every possible input that it's always allowed to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, like as you were saying again, just hit it again. It's not magic. Behind the scenes, it could be like a Perl script, like it's JavaScript, that's what's going on back there. It's doing stuff. It's calling APIs. It's reading and writing files. It's doing for loops over arrays. That's what it does, right? So, this is not an uncommon kind of concept. I always said to people like, it's just a computer program behind the scenes. Like, how are you going to actually program that? Like, that's the constraint you have. You have to actually build that with programming languages.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you heard it here first. Start building your bots using Bash scripts. That's the takeaway here.
Yeah, look, Bash scripts. Yeah, exactly.
So the next question here from Zirius is, marketing people like to sell chatbots as if customers are still talking to real humans, and real humans don't give you predefined choices.
That is true. I think that from the bot creator perspective, it is a best practice to not masquerade as a human, right? To say, fairly upfront that, hey, this is an automated system trying to help you solve your problem, and maybe there's a human available. And to be clear about when a human comes on, transfer. And I think you see that basically the name changes, things like that a lot of times. I think that those people who are actually trying to sell, utopian vision of the bot can handle everything, and thus, well, let me even be less cynical about that. That's about brand, right? It's about the brand experience, and they want it to be personable. They want it to match the voice of their brand. They want it to be something that fits into the experience that of the larger, e-commerce or whatever experience, right? And that's important. And we live today in a like we are our language generation tools and templating system is so much better than we had just a couple of years ago, and the ability to actually generate responses using AI technologies is like shocking in some ways, and that those are absolute problems. They're creative problems, not technology problems.
Right.
And there are expectation problems, not technology problems, I think.
Right. No, I agree completely with that, and yeah, I've seen one chatbot for an insurance company that I'm just not going to mention on the broadcast, where the way that their chatbot is designed to work is it's designed to behave a lot like their fictional spokesperson, and I think that that's fine because I think to your point that it hits the brand, but then it's also pretty obvious to anybody who's using this that they're not talking to an actual human, that the fictional spokesperson is not interacting with you, and I think that's kind of nice that you can draw that line of, hey, we're going to keep that experience for you, but we're also going to make it very clear that you're not talking to a human. That to me, faking like you're talking to a human is just that's a space you don't want to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that it is a far easier task to create the personality and stay consistent voice of like a character that has a specific, domain and functionality than it does have like a person who has a birthday and cares about what color things are or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I was saying this to a coworker earlier, it's like if your bot is like is only supposed to help you pilot your spaceship, then if you ask it for emotional advice, it's just going to say like, I'm sorry, I only know how to pilot spaceships.
I'm sorry, Dave.
And that's completely on brand. And it's like an easy way to get out of that problem. And, you just have to walk away and say, I have to go do some spaceship maintenance. Let me know if that's what you need. And if only more software would do that for us and just say, I'm not going to be useful for you. I'm just going to get out of the way.
Right. I feel like there's a lot in life that could, that could do that. Let's see. I'm trying to there's so many fantastic questions in here. I'm just sort of going through real quick. Okay. Then let me ask you this question, which is a little bit about that personality and a little bit of about the back and forth. Then is how does a chatbot maintain context in terms of remembering the stream of prior responses so that the current exchange is relevant? That's asked by Mindcast Software, and I'm going to assume that the scenario that that this person is thinking about is hey, what's the weather going to be today? How about tomorrow?
Yeah, sure. So, you might be surprised by this, but there's no magic there. Basically, as the bot, I'll talk about it like sort of through the lens of Composer, because that's how you might see it. So, as you're walking a user through a set of questions, you're capturing the response from them into what's roughly speaking a variable. And in the bots, we have the bot has memory, and it remembers things for about different contexts. So it could remember things about a user. It could also remember things about a session. It could also remember things like just for the in and out, one message in, one message out, right? Which we call a turn, so temporary. So you could basically imagine that as you go through your location dialogue that's going to say, where do you live? It would just store that location along with in the user space, and be available there in future things. Or you could like have a list of locations and things like that. So pretty no magic, but basically just like you store those variables and they are available for the bot to use later on, depending on what kind of variable it is.
Okay.
Cool, and that is a cool technique that you don't actually see as often as you would hope. Um, uh, I hope great question. Do that in your bots. It's a nice design.
I agree completely, and I'm thinking about a couple of chat devices that I communicate with on a regular basis. That I wish it would, just like even some of the basic things that would know that. Um, so Miki asks or sort of makes a point here that that the largest technology issue is building smart conversations, that customer line one should be taken into account even after 50 ongoing interactions, although 50 would be pushing it. So let me sort of take that and ask the question then, is we were talking a little bit about that back and forth. Basically, like how far back should the bot have memory, and how deep would we expect a bot to be able to go?
So, I mean, that is very situational. But I think that the best case scenario is that the bot has access to contextual information that's going to help that person get those tasks done, right? If you're an e-commerce site and you have a chatbot on your site and the user's logged in and the user comes and says, "Where's my order?" Does it need to know which order? You have one open order, right? So there's that kind of stuff. It makes a lot of sense. Where you see this a lot is like context handoff between human and agent and back to human, or back to bot, whatever. So the bot has collected a lot of information from the person. That information is available and should be made available to the agent in the handoff, and is frequently, and so they don't have to go and ask you all those same questions again.
Right.
So super important. Um, you know, but yeah, it's cool. And I mean, it would be cool. And I think, again, I'll just say, like, it would be great to see new bot developers adopt these kind of things where, heck, if you have a weather functionality and you have a location functionality and the user happens to have specified a location recently, go ahead and use it and then let them change it if they want. But it's a super cool feature to not have to like prompt the user all the time for stuff that you already know. And I would say another like version of that is like, if you're on Teams or if you're on Facebook or whatever, you know what the user's name is. Don't ask them what their name is.
Right. Yep.
If you're on a SMS, you know their phone number. You're SMSing them.
Yes.
Right. So there are things like that. Context is really important. So it's not just about what the person has said, but could be any number of like context signals that you get. I might be in a one-on-one chat with a bot. I might be in a group chat with a bot. I might, all of these kind of different things that affect the like outcome or the way the bot interacts.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. This actually happened to be just the other day that I was communicating with a bot because I was trying to troubleshoot something, and then it handed me off to a human, and now the human is starting to ask me all the different things the bot just did, and it's a really frustrating experience because like, no, I've already done this. Like, don't make me walk through all of this all over again. Like, you should know that, and I know that like with with an earlier version of Bot Framework, I had created a handoff mechanism, which was largely based off of something that a dear friend of mine, Hannah Kreger, who also used to work at CSC, built, where it would store like the last 10 messages, and then when it did the handoff, it would then make that available, so that way the human could then real quick read and get caught up on where things were, and then on top of that, also like get a sense for the current mood of the user, so that way they kind of know what it is they're walking into.
Absolutely. And look, the frontier of this kind of stuff is also that, hey, when the human agent comes online, the bot is still in the loop and can provide answers using that information and the context and its AI, models to the agent as well. So that that can be operating on both sides of the equation and helping people out because the nobody can go and query a user database faster than the chatbot can, right?
Right.
Or the like man in the middle. So it can be doing proactive work for both sides, which is I think really cool.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's another great question here from AJ Sud, who asked, how friendly are the chatbots created via Azure for business personnel, so that can they see how many words, things like that. So basically, like, how friendly are the chatbots that I can create in Azure? And then I guess the immediate follow up to that would be, how friendly should I be creating my bots? Should I be creating sardonic bots?
So, what do we mean by friendly to business users?
So
Like the cre-
yeah, so and
Go
you know
ahead.
what? Maybe I'm misinterpreting the question here. So the way that I read the question, I think, is now that you said that is different than the way that they're asking it. So I think the real question is, then I'm going to ask you the question that I want answered. But I think the question that AJ is asking here is. Is this something that could be built by a business user? And we talked a little bit about that with Composer.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, it is. This is how I like to say this. You're building a headless cloud API with with software that lives behind it. So, like I said, if you're super good at Excel and you feel confident deploying resources to Azure and navigating around the Azure portal and setting up webhook URLs and things like that, by all means, do it. I don't think that all business users are morons or anything like that. So I think that they can get away with a lot. And we're getting closer by the day. But this is a set of developer tools right now that are for people who are building internet software, and we're getting there. We're getting closer and closer every day. There are great products that are also available from Microsoft for that are less developer centric, and those they have different audiences for the Power Platform and things like that. So that's a great place for people who are less technical to start.
Okay.
But you'll see that they're very similar, and we all work together. So what's great is that I think, especially particularly within the Microsoft ecosystem, there is a great spectrum of tools for the different types of people in the workflow, and we recognize and are empathetic to the different roles that are going to be played in this world of like creating real chatbots. And we can this will kind of go into your topic, but the people who are only in charge of the language or personality of the bot, but don't need to do the programming piece of the bot, are also not the same people as the business processes bot, right? Or people. So we have to serve all of those kind of people, and we have this great interoperability thing. So you build it over there, it works over there, back and forth. Everything should play nicely because robots can be trained.
That's perfect. I am going to get to my question yet, but another great one just came in, which is how does Cortana play into all of this?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Okay, fair enough. So then, just
I
kicking back
mean,
real
yeah.
quick to Composer, is so a DIY approach for people that know how to use Visual Studio, and a Composer approach for how to use Office, and that's from Stoic Knight.
I think
So let me
that
restate the question.
is.
So the question is write the code if you know how to do Visual Studio. Use Composer if you know how to use Office.
I think that's fair. I mean, it's that certainly we're heading in that direction, right?
Okay.
It is a GUI tool. It allows you to like drag and drop, your construct your thing from pre-built building blocks, and you still have almost all of the capability of writing code directly, or using the SDK directly, but you don't have to like actually write C# or JavaScript code. But like I said, it's still there. So I don't think it's one or the other. I would say that the typical Composer user is using both Composer for the
Oh,
like
interesting.
conversation design, language modeling, and template management, and also using Visual Studio to like write some code on the side,
Okay.
right? So they're all part of one big project. You know, a lot, one way to think about it is like Composer is separating the content from the presentation, right? So we're separating out all of the like language model and all of the decision, the conversation decision away from the like actual executable code, because otherwise it's like a big
Okay.
mess. Every other type of software.
That makes complete sense. All right. Now I'm going to ask you my question, which is with regards to bot personality. Is How much personality should I pour into my bot?
I think as much as you want, without having your bot become potentially problematic when it is actually used, right? And the way it, let me put it this way: like, you don't need to have every bot does not need to know how to tell jokes. It does not need to have a million Easter eggs, right? The personality of your bot is going to come through in the way that it constructs messages, the way it answers questions, the style of buttons that it uses, and things like that, right? So there's a very small space, very, very small, for personality in the way that we think of it if we're like a snarky programmer guy, right? Like, you have, because most of it has to be like effective user interface, right? It's in the it might be happening with a customer or client. So in my old days, we had a bot that was fairly popular out there in workspaces, and we one day decided that it would be great if when somebody said LOL in the chat, that the bot would also just laugh along. So the bot would say like haha or like good one or whatever, right? We thought, that'd be funny. It'll be like a quirky thing that our little productivity bot will like add to the chat. And after we launched this functionality, and then 24 hours later, we looked at our analytics, and this trigger had fired like 150,000 times. And we're like, oh my God. Like, we thought that this thing was going to happen like every once in a while, but this thing happened. It happened. People were saying LOL so much more. And then I opened up my support inbox, and it was like, bot constantly laughing, cannot turn off laughing, right? And we're like, ugh.
I think we've also
So
discovered something about people as well. They're probably saying LOL too often into a chat window.
very possibly. So, you have to, it's great to have a personality. I think it's one of those ways to make it a little bit more fun, or more, not necessarily fun, but like appropriate for whatever, wherever it lives. But like I said, a little bit goes a long way. I would say a little bit goes a long way.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Then the last question is, because we're just about at the top of the hour, and I think this is like a perfect question, and this was not a plant, so it works out really well. Is a question from Delguns, which is, where do you see the future of chatbots heading?
I think about that people never really wanted to sit in front of computers and type with their fingers against like a hard keyboard that was like in a weird order to begin with, right? Like, these are all things that we put in between ourselves and the like things that we want in the world to happen. And so for me, this is the beginning of, or like just chipping away at this like, iceberg of computer software user interface garbage that has been put in between us and like the computational response that we want, right? So chatbots our screens are gonna get bigger and smaller, and they're gonna disappear in some cases. We're gonna have new modalities like AR glasses and holograms or whatever, I don't know, that are lasers beamed into our eyes that we'll need these kind of interfaces for. And the biggest thing for me is that the more your more that your software can understand human input in a natural way, the bigger the audience for that piece of software is, right? The more people it can serve, the more people of different needs, different backgrounds and cultures, all of that kind of stuff. So for me, it's like a big accessibility kind of thing that if we just built software this way, yeah, I think that it would just generally be better. So that's how I think about the future.
Okay. I love that. I think that's a perfect close to all of this. Ben, thank you so very much for coming on today, answering
My
questions.
pleasure.
Greatly appreciate it. And you can find Ben Brown on Twitter at Ben Brown. How he got that name, I will never know. And you can find me at Geek
I'm old.
Trader. And I'm gonna see if I can't find somebody to raid in the background here. But again, thank you to everybody for tuning in, and I will talk to you all again soon. Going to be talking more about bots tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. Come say hi. Bye.